have like the cool names for it, so that when we go to a business, we can go like, "Hey, I'm the executive director and vice president of Underdogs." They're
Right.
not like, because I can't go in like, "Hey, I'm wearing a Cranberries t-shirt. Will you give me like several $100 to open a venue?" And then go, "Yeah, the cops are on their way." But if I hand them something a little bit more professional, maybe they're willing to work with us.
Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. This is another episode of the Scoped Exposure podcast. Nothing would make me happier without being this early in season 3 of the podcast. And I feel like it would be a sin not to do a Boise specific podcast this early in the show. And when I was thinking about Boise specific guests, my good friend Alex came to mind, and getting to see him rock the bass with Witness Chamber just a couple weeks ago, maybe a month or so, as far as the time we're recording this, it made sense. So without further ado, please welcome Alex Marshall of Witness Chamber, Grave Titan, Natural Evil to the podcast. Thanks for coming on, dude.
Dude, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. I've been telling people forever how bad I wanted to come and chat with you on this, and seeing like Charlie and everybody talk to you. I was like, man, when's it my turn? So I was really excited when we got to
Now is your turn. Now is your turn.
Exactly.
Alex.
Yeah, exactly. I'm excited to hang and chill with you.
Yeah, I did this big long intro about Boise related episodes, and I think Charlie might have been Charlie I think would have been the last one. Obviously, like Dev from Rejection Pact has been on here before, but I think we got to reset the clock, if you know what I mean.
You got to get some of the younger guys. Enough of those older dudes, Devin and Charlie. What are they, 50 million years old?
Not these dinosaurs.
Yeah,
Dinosaur
exactly.
Dev over here. Nah, I love you, dude. I think all things, Alex playing in a bunch of cool bands, as well as starting kind of like a non-for-profit venue, which we're going to get into the weeds into a little bit here. But Alex, as you know, before we get into the music chats heavy, we got to check some bevs heavy. So tell the story of what you're bringing to the show and why people need to give a fuck about it.
Okay, so I don't know if this drink is so hard to find, and it's like a crazy moment when we'll just be like on tour at a Love's in the middle of nowhere, and I'll find it, and they'll have like because it's Blue Full Throttle, and I don't know. Do you guys have this in Canada? I don't think you do, because it's got an American flag on it.
Yeah, something that American looking does not. It should not be across the border, at least on our side.
So they have, I think, 3 flavors. So there's like regular, which is like a regular citrus. They have like an orange citrus, and then they got blue. And it used to be called Blue Demon. Now they call it True Blue, which sucks. It should be Blue Demon.
Should be Blue Demon for sure.
But it's so not that popular. So like I had to drive to like the other side of town, like where my dad lives. There's like one gas station I know in all of Boise that still has the blue flavor. So like when it was a couple days ago, I think it was this weekend, when we were gearing up for this, I was like, okay, I know he's got me on the bev check. I got to go get a Blue Full Throttle. And I bought like 3 of them. I cleared them out. So yeah, we're drinking I'm going to crack this right now. We're drinking.
Oh, please do. It makes me think like that can, like, if you were on your side of the border and then you're going and you're seeing something with a giant scary looking beaver and it's got all like the Canadian flag, like you would be just as confused. So that's probably why it's not on our side.
I think you guys got to make that. You got to have some like super patriotic Canadian and drink. I'd be really into that. I'd import it.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you that this beverage, it's almost like the opposite. Yours is like so crazy and over the top, and mine's just like a gradient of 2 colors. But I'm drinking a Golden Hour. This is a new flavor I found from them. It's like watermelon lime. So it's got like collagen infused sparkling water. So
that's like gorgeous. That's like a really pretty. I feel good looking at it.
Can you, for the visual people, can you hold up your bev? And then Jordan, cut to the side by side. Look how different these things are. That's so funny. Well, I am checking this. Alex, I'm really excited for this conversation with you, and thanks for coming on the show.
Bro, cheers. Thanks for having me.
Cheers. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
I made you go for like the double sip. As soon as I'm about to cheers you, I'm like, oh, he's gonna have to sip again after this.
I crush these, man. It's bad. I'm gonna be dead by 40 the way I drink stuff like this.
Oh man, I got a like a TikTok show up in my algorithm that was like drinking Red Bull every day, and then it was like to like a meme sound of like having a heart attack at 30, but then it's like stitched with someone saying, oh, like my like dad actually had like a heart attack, and it was because he was just drinking so many of these, and that's just stuck with me. But I don't think that's enough for me not to drink Red Bull and energy drinks.
It's almost more incentive just to see how, like, let's see if he's telling the truth. Yo, have you tried the new one? Does Canada get it yet? The new winter
fig apple one?
Fig apple?
Have not found it yet.
So
on
good.
the hunt. On the hunt.
So it might. I think it beats out dragon fruit for me now as my favorite.
Really?
Yeah. It's crazy. It's so good.
You know, apple is an interesting, like fig apple is alone a little like very unique and crazy, but like apple has always been like it could be really good, but like it's like, well, it's apple, like what could be good about it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But like my barber, he swears by the I think Bubbly came out with 2 new flavors where it's like the watermelon and then the green apple one, and he swears by the green apple and says watermelon is like dog shit. So maybe Apple is making a comeback flavor wise in 2022.
I'm a big apple. I like anything apple and anything grape. I'm in.
Yeah,
I love grape too. But yeah, that's a strange hill to die on. Go apple, but not watermelon. Okay, word. Shout out your barber.
You know what I'd like to see? I would like to see a Concord grape drink of some kind. Have you ever had Concord grapes?
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm with you here.
Yeah. Also, totally unrelated. Did you see the shirt that I wore specifically for your episode?
No. What are you wearing?
It's your.
Oh my god, dude, that's so sick. Oh my god, I would need a dude. I forgot to beat you up and take that shirt from you in Calgary. Dude, that is so cool. Have we ever talked about how into Disturbed? I'm gonna say was and pretend like I couldn't say am, but how I was into Disturbed.
Mm-hmm. I don't think we've ever talked about it, but like every single time I post a photo with me wearing it, it's like within 10 seconds I'm gonna get comment of you.
Dude, Disturbed is like my favorite band as a kid. Like I still snap it every once in a while. I'm all, you know what? This isn't cringy. This is embarrassing. I don't care.
Is
it's
so iconic.
Sick. Yeah.
Name another more unique and iconic metal like alternative music thing.
Oh yeah. Especially one that's like good, because like I'm sure there was like some new metal band that was like even wilder, but like they weren't good. And like Disturbed's got hits, man. First, like I'm gonna go first 4 records I fuck with. Like anything up through Asylum, I'm down with.
They put out a new song recently where because like Indestructible like has riffs, but then they put out this new song that's like almost like another way, like a synonym of Indestructible. I want to check what that is because that's gonna bug me now for this.
Interesting. I can't imagine listening to Disturbed in our Lord's year of 2022. I don't think I could stomach it. But if you're saying it's good, I'll give it a shot.
Oh, okay. So, Indestructible, but then the new single is called Unstoppable. I'm like, guys, you've already done that.
They're running out of ideas.
They're like, impervious, unattainable.
Poor Disturbed.
Favorite Disturbed song off of what is the first album? 10,000 Fists, or is there one even?
The Sickness.
No,
I think
well,
it's the sickness.
the sickness is the first one. Yes.
Meaning of life. Meaning of life is so hard. Meaning of life feels like it should be in like a Blade soundtrack or something. It's so good.
Man, there's a very big part of me that wants to open a show with the first riff of Stricken because it's just it's so good.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's very few. Like I already hear the clicks off of this podcast. Off of this is a Disturbed podcast.
Yo,
Fuck
I
that.
was thinking in my head, I was like, I went on Disturbed way too early to this. Nobody is sticking around for this. Nobody's gonna listen to anything I have to
Listen,
say.
I love Witness Chamber, but for these reasons, I'm out.
Oh, I also love Shark Tank, so that's sick that you said that.
Right. No, that's one of my favorite memes, and for these reasons I'm out.
Oh yeah.
Anyways, so Alex, as you know, you've listened to a few episodes of this podcast, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
And you know well enough that any new guest that comes on here, I need some context from you as far as how you got on the path of heavy music, hardcore, punk, metal, however you want to spin it. So tell me like the first time you were kind of discovering this kind of shit.
So like growing up, like my parents were both like kind of like glam metal people. Like they liked all like the 80s, like hair rock and stuff. So like
Mhm.
I kind of already came into like listening to like not just like pop music, but like rock and stuff. And then through I think it was like in like middle school, I started to get into like heavier like metal and stuff. And then in high school, um, it was actually through Jason, who plays drums in Witness Chamber. He moved from Wisconsin, which I lived in Wisconsin for a little bit too. So we are like, oh, that's kind of cool. And he like at that time I was into like scene core kind of stuff, like a day to remember favorite band type shit.
Mhm.
And he's like, yeah, that's cool. Like, have you listened to like any hardcore? I was like, well, I thought that's what this was. And then I remember him showing me like 3 or 4 bands, and the big ones were Terror, Code Orange Kids, Trapped Under Ice. And I was like, okay, these are pretty cool. I'm liking this. And I started kind of like exploring on my own. And I remember like the click moment, like pretty vividly, was just going on YouTube and I listened to Backtrack's Darker Half. And I found it on
Mm.
YouTube, just kind of just going through and being like, okay, hardcore's kind of interesting. And I heard that I was like, oh, yo, I like this.
Mhm.
And then that sent me kind of into the rabbit hole. And from there, I was like, okay, hardcore is the tightest thing ever.
Yeah, there's always like one band that kind of like opens it up because like they're like it's so funny because like to the day of recording this is us dropping the very first episode of season 3, which was Justice of Trapped Under Ice.
Yeah.
So like getting to hear from so many people, and I think just being in that generation where it's like Trapped Under Ice was that band to bring people over, like that
Mhm.
brought that more bouncy like groovy side of it, but like still had the hard like kind of like raw sound.
Yeah.
And it was the same for me. So like Backtrack as well, I think was the not the runner up, but I think a very close second to uh Trapped Under Ice's impact because that band definitely did it for me with like the vocal style and just like
Yeah.
and all that.
Yeah, I like it's. I think like the big 3 records on that because I really liked Code Orange Kids, like all the cool weird stuff they were doing. I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting, and I think a band like Code Orange Kids maybe even secretly plays a little bit more influence into some of the music I've made in the last years more than any of these bands. But listening to Darker Half, Keepers of the Faith, because at the time I didn't like go back into like old Terror and realize how crazy that was too. And
Mhm.
Big Kiss Goodnight was like, what in the world is this kind of music? And like, especially like a couple years later, figuring out like the context of how like, Trap and Rise came in and they just kind of hit the reset button. It's like, okay, we're changing the whole landscape of hardcore with the shit we're doing. And then they just
Mhm.
knocked it out of the park for years. I mean, there's no bad TUI releases, and everything they put out is just crazy, like next step up type stuff. Yeah, that was. I think Jay couldn't have put me on like a better like starting path, because like it would have been way easy to like find like some really bad hardcore bands on YouTube or something and be like, yeah, this isn't for me. But
Right.
to get to listen to like, yeah, Big Kiss Goodnight, Keeps of the Faith, and Darker Half, I was like, okay, yeah, hardcore's for me.
So that's an interesting idea. Like what if you were giving that like starter kit per se in 2022 to like a kid of the same age, like what are the 3 records / bands in this day and age that you think are like, this is what could send someone on the proper hardcore path, and maybe the more like, oh no, they could get lost in the of Mice and Men's and the Dance Kevin Dance. It's not to
Yeah,
say there's anything wrong with those bands, but it's just like
for
a
sure,
totally
sure.
different, you know.
Yeah, no, I hear. Just yeah, that's kind of where I came from too. I'm not cool, and I didn't come from punk. I came from shitty workcore. But man, that's a good question because I feel like when people, it's a relevant question too because like in Boise, there's like a big like death metal scene, and then a couple of those kids kind of pay attention to hardcore. And I feel like I've gotten this question before, where it's like, yo, what records should I check out? And it's kind of hard because like it almost kind of depends on like where you're coming from. Like if you're coming from punk, I'm probably not going to show you like the heaviest hardcore bands, but if you're coming from metal, I might not show you something that's like Oi influenced, you know. But I think like currently, I mean, the one that jumps out to me like for sure, it's like if you're new to hardcore and you're not feeling this, it may not be for you, but if you get this, you're gonna get it. Is Just Another Day, Never Ending Game. I think that's like our. I don't want to say it's our big kiss
I
at
didn't
night.
expect you to say that, but I totally agree. That's like that's a solid pick.
Yeah, because I feel like that's like a nice like maybe like middle ground where it's like it's not like the craziest heavy like almost on some deathcore type shit. It's not like super punk. That's a hardcore record. And it's like if you hear Just Another Day and it makes you feel something, it's like welcome to the club. Like you're in. Like you're into this
right.
this thing we have now. Man, I think like with modern bands that for sure, Just Another Day. And then depending on what the kid kind of listens to, like maybe they like a little thrashy stuff. I'm gonna show them Mind Force because Mind Force is another band where it's like I'm trying to think of records where like I listen to it and I'm like I feel like energy, like I feel like I want to get up and do something. Like Just Another Day does that for me. Anything Mind Force puts out does that for me. And I think to put my own like personal like little flavor on it, it's like I show somebody Division of Mind. And it's like let's see how crazy you are because like that Witness Chamber is a big Division of Mind type of band. Like we love that band, so it's like put that record on for somebody and see if they go nah, I don't know. It's like okay, well maybe this wasn't for you, but it's like another one is like yo, if you hear Division of Mind and you like it, it makes you feel away, like you're in.
Right. No, those are solid picks, and like if I could add one, I guess like runner up in the selection because you said 4 bands and I told you to list 3, so this would mimic the 4 that put you on. I think nowadays listening to Scowl's new record just to push a little bit more on that punk aspect as well. But it's interesting because like you could think of the top bands in hardcore, whether it's like Knocked Loose or Turnstile, but I would almost argue that those are like too big and they push way more in their own unique lanes where like Neverending Game, Division of Mind, Mind Force was a great one as well, are like kind of like this is the core, come to the core of hardcore first and then you can kind of like go down the specific tunnels.
Yeah, it's like I guess in my mind, like if I'm like trying to show somebody like the bands we're talking about, I'm kind of almost hoping they already listened to a Knocked Loose or a Turnstile or something.
Totally.
Not like on the fringe by any capacity, but something that like transcends that line. Like, if I say 3 Knee Deep to like some random kid in like a metalcore shirt, they're gonna go, "What the fuck are you talking about?"
But is that like a swimming thing or like?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like no, I can't swim. No, not that. But it's like if I say Knocked Loose to that same person, there's like a chance they go, "Oh yeah, I saw that band." Like, "Oh yeah, I've heard that." Or they're gonna do the arf thing, and I'm gonna cringe. But it's sick,
Right.
But so like I guess like with some of those bands, and that's kind of again the thing where like I'm gonna set up these 3 records depending on what you listen to. So it's like if you're wearing a Knocked Loose shirt, I'm gonna show you X, Y, Z. If you're wearing a Turnstile shirt, maybe I'll show you A, B, and C or something like that.
Yeah, there should almost be a not like a chart, but like if there was some kind of thing where it's like, okay, who are like those top bands that have like gone beyond the Knocked Looses, the Turnstiles, the Code Oranges, and even like Terror is like a band where they can kind of go wherever. Sure. But they have definitely like stretch their arms to still touch that core, so to speak. But yeah, that I would say anyone listening to this podcast, do that exercise of like, what are like the top 3 records for bands now at the time of listening to this that you would help put someone on the right quote unquote hardcore path? I think that's an interesting
Yeah.
exercise.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's the point where now I kind of want to hit the group chat, and be like, yo, if some new kid came up to you at some show here and was like, yo, give me 3 records to listen to, I'm curious what everyone would say. Because
Mm-hmm.
I bet you a bunch of us would say Just Another Day. I don't think many of us would say anything similar. Like, I bet Hunter would say Mind Force because he loves Mind Force. But I think our answers would be pretty varied. It'd be kind of cool to see, like, what like modern,
I'll
like,
put it in this
hardcore
episode
records.
because like people can like respond to it. So I'm
Yeah,
kind of curious, and as those start to come through, I'll share the analytics. But yeah, that's a
that'd be sick.
interesting idea. So so you're discovering some of this stuff, and it seems like as soon as you found backtrack as your example, it's like, okay, I can kind of get into this. Were you like, did you come from a musical family, or was it like discovering this music made you want to play music?
So at the time, I was already mid. So it's funny. So Hunter, who plays guitar in Witness Chamber, him and I have been in bands since like day one. Like, we played in like probably almost a dozen bands together. I was in like one of my first bands with him, played my first show with him. So like at the time that we met Jason and like started listening to hardcore, we were already in like a scene kid band. My family wasn't super musical. Like my parents both loved music, but neither of them were musically inclined. I know my grandfather was like a jazz guy, like played like saxophone in Boise, which was kind of sick. But I didn't have a lot of like musicians around me. I was just kind of like, when I was 10, I was like, it was this. Have you ever heard that band Dokken? That like glam band?
Dokken? No.
Yeah, Dokken.
Dokken?
They're like an old 80s like hair band. And like that was a band that made me want to play music. I didn't know what I was gonna play
Oh,
yet. I thought I
okay.
was gonna play like stadium rock, but I was like, I saw my mom had this like VHS tape of like their like behind the scenes and all their music videos, and I was like, I want to play guitar. That's it. I got guitar.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Uh,
they fit the vibe for a glam. I'm just looking, and the guitar player has a full on just like skull and crossbones like across the guitar.
yeah,
I
yeah.
love that.
George
That's
Lynch,
cool.
he's got some crazy axes too. I really want to get like a George Lynch signature.
Okay.
But yeah, so I was already like playing music, and like at the time I was playing like metalcore and stuff, and then it kind of like transitioned. At first I was like, hardcore's cool, but I don't really want to play hardcore. And then I kept diving, kept down. I was like, no, I kind of do want to play hardcore. And then me and Hunter and Jason started our first band not that long after that.
Was the reason to play off of seeing how people react at hardcore shows, or was it like just the music that you were like, I want to play this?
It was definitely just the music. Like I think the way shows were, I don't want to say they were like a barrier to entry, but at the time that we all started going to shows here, Boise was dead. It was coming at the tail end of anything happening. It was a pretty rough period where a lot of shows were skipping here. Not a lot of people come to shows. I remember my first hardcore show here was like 15 people. It was Agitator, Wrong Answer, and there was no one there. The room was it was like the first like DIY show I ever went to. So it was definitely like a culture shock. So I think it was definitely the music, but I would say now almost more so is like the room and the culture and stuff. I think that keeps me playing music just as much as the actual music does anymore.
Totally. Yeah. And I think that is going to be a great talking point as far as like, I think most Western Canada people who are listening to this podcast, like there's a lot of love for Boise. And I think even just in the 5 or 6 years, as far as like, seeing, different bands come through Calgary, seeing different bands come through Vancouver, just seeing the growth of that scene and how it seems that most I wouldn't say like full scale, like, like the time we're recording this is the same day Blink 182 is announcing their
Yeah.
gigantic tour. And I don't know if that is coming to Boise necessarily, but most DIY stuff seems to be going through your city, which I think is very, very sick. Was that like, because that's a thing where you could go to a show and there's 15 people there and like, am I in the right place? And then you're, not doing that. Or did that do the opposite effect where it kind of put a fire on you to be like, I want to help steer the ship and help change this a little bit?
Well, I think like the first couple years, it was more just being infatuated with like the music and the sound, where I was kind of like, in spite of this being a weird type of thing where like there's not that many people coming to shows. I don't know anybody. People act a lot different. Because I mean, prior to this, I was going to like stadium metal shows. Like I was going to like the Mayhem festivals and things like that. Like
Right.
I was going to like butt rock shows, and then going to that was definitely like a different world. But it didn't dissuade me. It was kind of just like, yeah, this is how it is. And I was like, okay, cool. If it means I get to listen to this cool music, like, yeah, I guess it's Boise. It's not a big city. So yeah, 20, 25 people in a room. That's how it goes. I mean, I remember like one of the first like hardcore shows we played. It probably wasn't our first show, but it was one of our first few. Rotting Out played here. And it's funny because like I think about it now, it's like I don't even know if we could get Rotting Out here. Like we could, but I'd have to like charge a lot for it, and they'd probably have to take like a pay cut for it. Like it would not be their biggest turnout on tour. But at the time, Rotting Out played, and there was like 15, 20 people in like a 300 cap room. And we were still like, yeah, screw it. This is how it is. That's cool. Like we know everybody in the room now. It's cool. And I think that's you might think it's humbling, and it kind of was, but now I'm like, damn, Boise's kind of sick. Even now where we have like a lot better turnouts, I'm kind of like, it's sick. I still know pretty much everyone here. Like it's definitely a different world than like an LA show, a New York show or something where,
Right.
like hardcore is immense there. It's we're not doing Sound and Fury in Boise anytime soon, but it's kind of sick because like, I can go to pretty much any show here and I can do a 360 degree, no matter where I turn, I can see 2 to 3 people I know. And when I see people I don't know, I'm hyped. So yeah, I think
Totally.
at first it was definitely like culture shock, but I was like, you know what? Like, this is cool. This is kind of just the world I want to be in. So who cares if there's nobody here? Who cares if nobody's really listening to our music out of our parents who don't even like it? Like we're just gonna do it.
Right. Yeah. And I think like that is definitely something where I think it's a bit of a when you come from like a quote unquote underdog scene and something that's a little less of the a scene that isn't spoiled. And I'm saying that with peace and love to all the people from California, Florida, New York, but like the
Yeah.
places where you could book any band and there will be kids and people and bodies that fill that room.
Yeah.
When you come from a place like Winnipeg, Manitoba, or Boise, Idaho, or Calgary, Alberta, like you have to really like fight for it. And it's really
Mhm.
cool to see for Boise and just like different scenes that I've been a part of like you get excited when you see strangers versus like, oh yep, it's the same group of
Yeah.
kids here again this month. But no, it's really dope. And not to say that's like, oh, I'm not gonna get to know those people because
Yeah.
you're like, who are you? Where did you come from?
Yeah. Exactly.
We're definitely gonna be talking about this, but I told Alex that a must talking point for this episode, and this is a selfish reason, is talking about the almighty, gone too soon, in my opinion, Swarm Beating, and talking about the DBK 5-year set. Tell for those that don't know, which you are about to, tell me what Swarm Beating is, and we'll eventually get into the one and only Canadian set of that band.
So for those that don't know about the greatest joke we ever told, we're beating. So it truly was like that band was not supposed to be anything, and
No.
we started that because at the time I was in Ingrown with Ross and Dave, and we had found like the videos of like Billy Club Sandwich and like the Vendetta music video. We were like, what the fuck is this? This is crazy. And we were like, yo, it'd be fun to cover this, but then we're like, this isn't really what Ingrown sounds like. Like, is that too strange? So we're like, well, we should just start another band. And so Ross was like, hey, do you want to like start like a beatdown band? I was like, yeah, can I do vocals? He's like, yeah. And then we wrote 4 songs so we could cover Sucker Punch and then built an entire set around that. And then after a while, I started covering like Vendetta. And it was mainly just a thing where like when England was like playing too many shows around here, we would do a Swarm Beating set. Or like if there was like a heavier show, like a metalcore show that needed something, like we put Swarm Beating on there. Like where Ingrown didn't fit, we would do Swarm Beating. And it was just kind of like we just goof around because it was nonsense. We would just I mean, it was to the point where by the time that band was done, I was doing pig squeals in that band. Like it was just it was how far can we push this?
Sure.
but it was also just hilariously fun. So, and yeah, and the one time only out of state, out of country show was the DPK 5 Year Fest.
So,
Man, that was such a good weekend.
such a great weekend. It flew by because it
Oh
was
yeah.
like bands starting at like 11:30 or noon and then going
Mhm.
all day. But okay, so at the time you're playing an ingrown, you were playing bass at the
Yeah.
time? Yeah. So then like were you like um cuz it's so funny watching the video because it's like Ross has like a single coil like guitar that he's running through some crazy amp.
Yeah.
And okay, so you're playing bass and then was it like you've always wanted to do vocals in the band, or you're like, oh, well, if it's for a project like this, like I'll just like fuck around and just kind of do my thing.
Somewhere in between. Like I wasn't ever like, oh, I've got to be a vocalist, but I was kind of like, it'd be like shitty vocals in a band like that. It's like we're just goofing around. Like, what's to lose? And then I found out I liked the vocals in bands a lot.
Mm.
So yeah, it was just kind of this funny, and I think like my vocal style, especially at the time, just kind of fit music like that. But I was like, yeah, I could front a band like this. Like that'd be fun.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it wasn't like I was destined for this, but it was also a little bit more than like a why not, but it was kind of a why not, you know?
Yeah. But I would argue that you were destined to do that because that
You
was
would, yeah.
the initial like, meeting of you and I,
Yeah.
obviously. And I guess like Swarm beating offered by Taylor because I knew Taylor fucked with you guys. Like he was fucking in the
Yeah.
mosh pit with fucking like boxing gloves, just
The
wailing on
welding
people.
gloves. Oh
So
yeah. Yeah,
was it
I
like
think Taylor.
offer to Ingrown and then you guys suggested the Swarm Beating edition, or was it like no, I'm reaching out about both?
I think I'd have to go through the messages again, but I want to say it was both because Taylor definitely fucked with sword beating. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I remember exactly what you're talking about. He told me right before we were playing. It was either right before or right after. He's like, "Yeah, I lost Oz and I have to mosh with welding gloves on." I was like, "That's so sick. I love that." And then you hit it perfectly too in that video. You get like a good shot of him doing it, and it's so
Right.
funny. But yeah, I'm pretty sure he hit us up for both of them. I think Ingram was like, well, duh. Yeah, Ingram should definitely play. But he's like,
So
you didn't want to play too? And we're like, yeah, that's hilarious. Let's do
that's
that.
so sick. And it's so funny too because when there's a big festival with tons of bands, people are kind of yeah. A good friend of mine once said like festivals are kind of where you have to really like convince people to watch you play
Yeah.
because someone's gonna stand there and like watch you for like the first couple songs and decide is this the band that I skip to go take a piss, to go hang out
Yeah.
with some people, get some food, whatever.
Yeah. Is
And
this
when
been my
there's
lunch break?
yeah, exactly. So, if it's kind of like, oh yeah, this shit isn't for me, or this band's kind of lame, I'm gonna kind of do that. So, and especially when it's like earlier in the day, it's kind of like, oh, like, do I want to, chill? Because as if a festival is properly structured, most of the hype bands are towards the end. But you guys
Yeah.
played, I think, third, and so it was like
Yeah.
really early in the day, and I just felt like the minute you guys started, it was like okay, I'm afraid of what's happening.
Dude, that's so funny to hear that considering like how like not that serious we took that band. And by the
Mhm.
end of it, I mean by the end of it we kind of were. Like I still have like the like rough draft of like a music video on my hard drive upstairs. Like
Mm.
we were like gonna do that band for a little while, and then we just kind of we got busy, and then Ingrown decided to take over the fucking world, which is so sick. Um, yeah, there was definitely it definitely felt like the room changed a little bit, and like I feel like that was like a little bit of us, but a lot of it of just like all the homies in Vancouver. Like
Mhm.
I remember coming home and watching that set because I think like ours was like the second set that came
Yeah, it
out.
was
Everyone
I
booked
think
for
it
it. I was like,
was
that's really funny.
Juice from the pre-show was the first
Yeah,
one, which, is always funny because like, I think a lot of people compare me to like, the Canadian Hate 56, but the way Sunny and I release our videos is like like he's got this whole like setup and people vote for it, but I'm like, okay, what are the things that I know people want to see and
yeah,
have that really short attention span? And sometimes I like to prioritize, something for like the people that helped get me there or help were
yeah,
involved. So like the Juice set was a kind of a a nod to Taylor and all the work that he and the DPK crew did. But then I'm like, Swarm Beating is definitely right after that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and I remember like watching it when we got home and watching with a bunch of friends that couldn't come to the fest, and I was like, okay, watching us, like, yeah, I look goofy. I don't like how I look when I'm on stage, whatever. And then you like cut to like people moshing, and like there's just shots of people just like straight up like throwing fists, like just fighting. And I'm like, what is happening in Vancouver? I love this. I think that room made that set way more than the band did. I love it. I treasure it deeply.
I'm thinking about it now where it's like as soon as you say let's go and then like Charlie hits the double kick, I'm like, oh fuck. Like we are about to go right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that just like that giant jump in guitar tuning. Honestly, I think set the tone too. Because God, we were in like drop A or something. Like it's just the strings are just falling off at that point, and
Yeah.
Dave's playing bass. It was just like well, it's time for this shit to happen now. It's like the beatdown band's here. So
I also liked how like as the set progresses, Dave is like taking off like layers and it just becomes more and more like I'm almost just playing in my pajamas.
yeah,
Or like what I would wear to bed at this point.
there's definitely a point you have to listen super close, but I've caught it when I listen to it. There's a point where I say like we're losing layers because Dave just keeps taking clothes off. Like every time we stop playing a song, Dave takes off a jacket or something. It's
Yeah,
so
it
sick.
just becomes more and more just like, yeah, we're from Boise.
Yeah, we're turning up the heat.
You know, and you know, the perfect way to end the set is like you guys covering Irate and like if it felt like anyone who was like on the fence fully, you know, came over and
Yeah.
you know, and that was just like wild to see. Like did you know, obviously the cover game is kind of weird because sometimes you expect, oh yeah, this is gonna pop, but did you expect it to pop that much?
I knew there was like 5 or 10 people in that room where I'm like, these dudes are gonna have some fun right now. Like people that came from Boise who already knew we were covering it. I knew like a couple people from like the DPK crew and like 1 or 2 other people would be like down and be like, okay, cool. This. Half the time, I think that's what the cover game is for me anymore. It's just like, can we get like the 5 people in this room who know this song to just lose their mind? But I didn't expect that many people. And I think there was like a lot of people out of town too, where it was like, oh shit, this weird ass fucking band from Boise is covering Irate right now. This is insane. Right. And that cover pops out pretty well. I, like, I think that's one of the better cover picks a band I'm in has ever done.
Yeah. And it was so funny because immediately after, I think it was just years of me punishing you, as well as I'm sure other people like listening to this podcast would be like, when is Swarm Beating coming to Canada? When is Swarm Beating playing more shows? But I think we talked about this at the Calgary show. I think you guys doing the one-off in Vancouver almost makes that moment cooler than, you know, if you were just doing it time and time again.
It's like a legend rule. Like we Jason and I were talking about this the other day about like bands who like get back together after a long time versus bands who just like stay dead. It's like, you know, like obviously you want to see your favorite band get back together and play again, but and not that there's anything wrong with getting back together and playing cool music again because that rocks. Right. It's like there will be bands where it's like if that band never gets back together, like they're Hall of Fame status. Like there's no touching it because it's like we never got to see that band come back and put out a bad record or a bad band come back and do like a weird tour or like, you know, to relive the glory days. And then everybody was like, oh, maybe that wasn't that cool. Or maybe that was a time and place band. Like if you're a cool band, you do the thing and then you call it an afternoon and then you just leave it. Like no one can tell you didn't do the coolest thing. And I am in no means saying that Swarm Beating is a Hall of Fame band. I don't, it is the antithesis of that. But I'm saying, sometimes it's cool to just like do the thing you came to do, call it a day, and then just, you know, that's it. People are never, you're not going to sully that image ever.
Right. And you know, it's always funny because like, you know, as I've documented bands, I also document people through this podcast. And I remember having Joseph on from Tsunami, and he was like, like Tsunami was just gonna play like 3 local shows and then break up. And then, you know, now that band is almost like allowing the members of that band to tour and travel and like almost have like their own business, like why wouldn't you change in order to be able to, you know, play that out? And you know, that's something that I think is cool too, where people can have an idea for something, but it's totally cool to change your mind and just like have it, have it be what it is. So, that's yeah, it's very very cool to see. And very cool to hear that, maybe you're not saying that Sora would never ever play a show again, but the timing needs to be right.
Every once in a while, Charlie and I will talk about it, or Ross and I will talk about it, and we're like, yeah, one day it's gonna happen. And then we don't talk about it again for a while. And it's hard because like all of us are so busy. Like Charlie and Ross have Ingrown. Charlie has Rejection Pact. I've got, I'm in a million bands and, underdogs and all this stuff. And it's like one day there's a good chance that we'll do something funny again.
Right.
Maybe that music video comes out. Maybe we just play a one-off in Boise if we're bored. I think the best bands come out of like what Joseph was saying, or like Swarm Beating and stuff, or even like this new band we have, Dead to Rights. It's kind of like Swarm Beating light. It's literally just because I broke my wrist on tour in March, and we had like shows Witness Chamber couldn't play. It was like, well, fuck it, I can sing with one broken wrist, so like I'll do vocals and we'll start another band. I think sometimes shit like that creates the coolest bands. So who knows, man? Maybe Swarm will play the next Scope Exposure Fest. Probably not, but maybe.
I'm like, don't tease me, bro.
Oh, I love it. It'd be fun.
Yeah, well, it again, like being able to document moments from this podcast. It's always fun for me to see things come to fruition, and then I could just clip this part of the episode and then post it beside the thing. Speaking of more current stuff, because we're this is like the unicorn band of your body of work. Let's talk Witness Chamber, because that definitely is one of the current projects that you're doing, as well as a project that I see just like getting on more and more people's radars as like, you guys are playing more shows. At the time of recording this, you only have one release under your belt, but I am feeling it that the next release is really going to push you guys out into the mix that much more. I was talking to Hunter at the Calgary show because it sounds like the beginnings of Witness Chamber came from another Boise band. So can you, because that I fucked with State of Suffering, and then to hear that it's not that, well, just correct the record if Witness Chamber isn't, like how much of Witness Chamber is State of Suffering percentage wise, if you had to say that?
So also, I want you to know how funny it is that it was like a Nardwar moment when you said that to Hunter. Like I remember walking past you two talking about it, and I heard somebody say State of Suffering. I looked over, I was like, Spencer knows about State of Suffering? That's fucking cool. So yes, so what it was, so I was not in State of Suffering. State of Suffering was the three other guys in Witness Chamber. Jason and Hunter played guitar, Chad did vocals, and then there were a couple other guys in that band too. And that band was sick as hell. I missed State of Suffering a lot. But just kind of in some other bands where it's like they came in, they did what they wanted to do, and then they were like, cool, it's time to put that down and start something else. And kind of out of the ashes of State of Suffering is when we were like, yo, let's start another like just hardcore band. Because like State of Suffering was a hardcore band, but they had like kind of the metalcore tinge to it. Yeah. At the time we were doing Natural Evil, which is like a crossover band. We had Grave Titan, which is like a hardcore band playing death metal. We were like, man, let's just do a band where it's like we can just call it hardcore. Like there's no modifier to it. I'm like, yeah, that sounds fun. And that was kind of the way State of Suffering was going. I think I'm not the person to ask because I wasn't in that band, but I know two of the songs on Paradise Awaits are songs that they wrote for State of Suffering. They were like, this is like just hardcore. This is maybe a little different. I think it's Time and Emptiness are the two. So a good chunk of that, because I mean, it's 75% of the Witness Chamber was in State of Suffering. At least two of the songs were like State of Suffering songs that just never got put out. So yeah, it was kind of like out of the clay or out of the mold of State of Suffering, we decided to make Witness Chamber. So it's a good chunk.
Okay, so I can on record say that I was even a fan of Witness Chamber before Witness Chamber.
Yeah, you certainly can. Absolutely, you can. That's so sick.
No, it was because at the time, because I'm a firm believer through this podcast, through just other things where it's like sometimes all it takes is like one band in a specific scene to be the initial point into the rest of the band. So like obviously Ingrown has helped put Boise on the hardcore map like almost indefinitely. And then you get into the Rejection Packs, and then State of Suffering was like the third of those discoveries for me. I was like, man, this band is so sick, and like no one is talking about it. And then to find out that there was a connection there was really, really funny. So you guys have put out Paradise Awaits. I think just a couple weeks ago, you guys, or maybe even less time, it came up on a year of that release being out. So as far as like what's on the horizon and what's awaiting, is there anything that you can say as far as like, future releases and timelines or anything like that?
Yeah, so on this last tour, we were playing, I think like half our set was like new songs. So we've definitely got a lot of new stuff. And I think we're playing a fest this weekend in Salt Lake. We're playing that Wild West Fest. And then after that, I think we're like chilling for the winter. And the plan is to start working on like the next thing. We've been back and forth with it because like I'm very into the idea of like waiting until like everyone's begging for it to like put out another record or like just like ride off of what we have for a long time. But I think we're also so excited for this new stuff and I think it does kind of push us to like the next level a little bit. I think I still love Paradise Awaits, don't get me wrong, but I think our new songs kind of like smoke some of the stuff we have on Paradise Awaits. I feel like we're just like really coming into our own now. So I think the plan here is we'll kind of chill for a little bit in the winter and start to record, and you probably will see something new next year.
Yeah. I think something else that's been interesting that I've at seeing other people discover that record. What's interesting is a lot of people when they see the artwork, they assume that it's an older release. Was that like intentional to have like a bit of like a nod to like instead of having like a very quote unquote modern version of a hardcore album cover?
I mean, I don't, at least not for me. So the art was done. So we put out that record through Words of Fire. Rest in peace, no longer a thing. But Matt from Words of Fire reached out, so I think Adrian did the art, and we just kind of like gave him like the songs, like the ideas and themes, and just kind of like this is like what this band like sounds like. What do you think it looks like? And just kind of Matt was like, I got you, I'll take care of this, and that's what they came back with, and we fucking love it. Like we're using that little soldier guy on everything now because we're like, yeah, this is exactly how we think this band looks based on how it sounds. So I don't think it was super intentional to make it look old, at least from our end, but that's kind of sick that people think it looks a little bit more like older because like I don't think in a lot of ways we sound like a lot of modern hardcore bands for better or for worse. So yeah, that definitely wasn't an intention, but I'm not mad about that at all.
Yeah. And yeah, it's sometimes it's serendipitous to like put something out and then other people are just like it's not that it's cuz I think most bands try to have a really clear connection of like, we're a thrash band, so this is like crazy, like, like skulls and flames
Yeah.
and fucking motorbikes or whatever the fuck.
Yeah.
Or we're a beatdown band. We got fucking chains and like this is how our logo looks. So sometimes
Yeah.
it's really cool to see a band not do a riskier play, but do something a little outside of the box of whatever their closest subgenre connection is. And then, sometimes
Yeah.
it plays, really well. And sometimes, people get confused and it's the whole thing. So I think like when the thing that I think about is when Endgame dropped our demo, I was kind of like on the fence about our artwork just because it was just a little like
Oh, really?
this is just this is just a devil breaking through a brick wall, giving the finger. Like I'm not sure. And then
Sick.
we sent it, and a lot of people thought it was going to be a little bit more like classic hardcore, a little bit more New York, but like they liked hearing the thrash edge that I think a
Yeah.
lot of our stuff have. So sometimes things just play out the way they do, and you just have to roll with the good and the bad.
Yeah, I think tropes are things for like a reason, and there's nothing wrong with them. Like, yeah, if you're a thrash band, put a fucking skull on your record. That's cool. If you're a beatdown band or like a slam influence band, make your logo damn near illegible. That's cool. I'm also a big fan though of like breaking those tropes. Like it's even like with Grave Titan, like that band is like a death metal band, but like it's a bunch of hardcore dudes. And it's like with that band, I was like, the one thing I'm not gonna do in this is write like gore lyrics. And there's nothing wrong with gore lyrics. Like Cannibal Corpse is like one of my favorite bands, huge influence on Grave Titan. But I was like, that's just the trope I don't feel like hitting. But that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with it. And it's also sick to kind of like bend them a little bit. So yeah, Endgame, but not like an art like that and kind of surprising people, rocks as fuck. That's sick. Do that.
Yeah. So I think a common thing with any band from Boise, for real believers, people will say Boise in between songs. People will chant Boise at shows. Is that just a Western Canada thing per se, or do you find that any place you go with any of the bands that you've played in, where people
It,
know that's what you do for Boise bands?
It's spread. It's spread for sure. Yeah, I think Vancouver was like area X for it. Like it was like the origin point.
Totally.
And then and now it's everywhere we go for sure. Like it's sometimes there'll just be like one guy who does it, and we're like, that's funny, that's sick. And then like sometimes it'll be like half the room. We'll be like, Chad will be like, we're winning the streamer from Boise, and everyone will go Boise, and I just like I can't not laugh when because I'm like that's so funny. And like bands will come here, like I'll book a band and they'll come out. It's like, yo, it's great to be here in Boise, and then a couple other people, Boise. And I'm like, this is insane.
It's like second nature now.
Years.
It's like you learn how to ride a bike, and now it's instinctual to say Boise.
Yeah, and then same with the Boise on top. Like, Ken Axtergine got a hold of that, and now everyone says that too. And
right,
it's
they were the megaphone for that.
Yeah, it's funny how like we got catchphrases for this city where hardcore bands used to like avoid at all costs, and like now you don't walk 10 feet around a Boise band without hearing something about it. It's dope. I'm gonna be real. It's kind of your fault because the Boise thing came from the Ingram set, which was recorded by Scoped Exposure, and nobody hears that stuff if it wasn't for you. So you're the one to thank for that.
So you're talking about the DBK set of that.
Yeah.
Okay. Because the only times that I had seen Ingrown, obviously before Hold Your Ground, just a couple months ago, was them playing to like, which is also weird because who's the current bass player of Ingrown?
Right now it's Gavin.
Yeah, so Gavin was playing bass for them at this time, and this is like back in like 2018, which is funny because like he's wearing this hat like this, so I can't even really see his face. But then he was like, "Oh yeah, I used to play bass for Ingrown." I was like, "Wait, at this show?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh, okay, I remember seeing you." So
he looks like a character you haven't unlocked yet. It's kind of sick.
Yeah, like a little Smash, like a what's that? Like a modded Smash version.
Yeah, exactly.
But he's one of those characters.
But yeah, issue with the Who's That Pokemon.
Who's that Ingrown bass player? It's Gavin.
Yeah,
Boise.
Gavin's the best. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Gavin's the number one. But yeah, Gavin played bass on that one.
Yeah. So seeing them play in a tiny little church basement, and then seeing them at DBK. But I do remember specifically just in between songs, just hearing you like, and not even only hearing you, seeing you off stage, just yelling that, and hearing people just bounce. Like, I feel like I need to just clip that and just post it with no caption other than Boise on our Instagram. Like, just before this podcast drops.
I don't know what I was on about. I don't know what. I have no idea why I was doing that. Because that thing didn't even come from me. Our friend Gabe was the one that used to say it like that. And like he didn't do it like a chant thing. He would just say it about just really aggressively. It was like almost like a DMX bark. He'd just be like, Boise.
Yeah.
He wasn't at that fest, but I was like, I'm gonna just yell this because like that's who we are. We're from like we're in a different country right now. Like we gotta let them know where we're from. Right. And then everyone else started saying. And I remember like specifically, there's a point where like I've been doing it I'm berating people for like almost 20 minutes, and I think it was Mishi goes like, "Where is that?" And then I lean over and go, "Idaho." And I was like, I don't know
where is that?
Or what I was doing, but
yeah,
that was a fun set.
Yeah, and I think what's funny too is that I think every scene should have some kind of weird local thing that you do at for your scene and for bands. Like when I grew up in Winnipeg, for some reason, when the time that I was going to shows, all like people would just bark in between songs, like but like
That's
so it's like,
so
you know, like
cool.
Winnipeg, you know, like bark squad. But it would put some bands off because bands would be through and through. It's like, yeah, thanks so much. We're cross me. Oh, okay. Like people would be so confused. Like, is that a good thing that you're barking at me, or is that a bad thing? I'm not 100% sure. But
That's dude. The bark is way cooler than the Boise thing. I wish we
yeah,
would have done that. That
yeah,
rocked. Yo, speaking of Winnipeg, when we played there, I'm afraid I'm gonna say their name wrong, but I think they're called Pure Impact from Winnipeg. Do
yes,
you know that band?
yep.
Yo, that band rips. You mentioning Winnipeg, I just was like, we played with them and they were so sick. They sound like 86 mentality. And I remember them covering Negative Approach, and everybody, all like the young kids in the room, just kind of stood there, doe eyed. I was like, they cover Negative Approach right now. Shout out that band. That's sick.
Yeah.
That band gets some
Shout out
love.
to Kowalski. I know that, you know, Meantime's the main thing, but Pure Impact is a dope project that he's doing right now.
Band rocks.
Yeah. So it is wild. Like, who's the first, or have Boise shirts even been made? Because I feel like people around the world are gonna start buying Boise shirts
Just
if
a
they're
shirt that
made.
just says Boise in all caps. That'd be
Right.
pretty sick. I could
Yeah.
see it. Well, in the spirit of in-ground, we have to do it in like the ACDC style font, but we could do that.
Yeah.
That'd be pretty sick. I bet we could sell those pretty fast.
It's almost like there's a meme that I saw where it's like some dude in England listening to Tsunami, and he's like, me being on the other side of the country and being told I'm a bitch because I'm not from the Bay. But I feel like the Boise thing is just a couple months away from it being like an international, like people in Australia and New Zealand and Asia saying Boise. But
We're taking the Boise tour all around the world.
yeah, come on. This is the Boise Blast.
Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of Boise, a big thing I wanted to talk to you about, Alex, is your non for profit venue and Underdogs and all that. So I think any you know I think back to when Charlie was on the podcast and like his drive and focus of trying to make hardcore dope here in Boise, you know, seems to be a very common thing for you. What was the shift into like, okay, we can just like talk about how we want things to change, and now we're actually doing something to make a change?
I mean, for a while, it was definitely just like talking about it. And like Jason and I have this thing, because Jason and I live together, and we have this thing where like when one of us gets on an idea or both of us get an idea, we'll be in our kitchen at like 1 a.m, just like talking about like pipe dreams or like cool ideas that we had that we, probably will never do. Or talking about this or that. And the venue one came up a million times. We are like, man, we need a smaller space here. We need a room that doesn't cost as much. We can do like the smaller hardcore shows or like this smaller band. And, we don't lose a bunch of money or they get paid enough. And it's like, yeah, man, it'd be so sick to open our own venue. And, we did that 100 times. And it wasn't too long after, either before or after that first Witness Chamber run in March, where we were talking about Real Art Tacoma. And I want to give a huge shout out to them because they were where we got the idea for this. Because I think I went on their website or something, and I was like, yo, they're a nonprofit, like they're 501c3 status. And I mentioned it to Jason. I was like, bro, what if we were a nonprofit? Because like the trouble with opening a venue here, and people have done it before here, of course. We have some venues here, but they're few and far between, and they cost a lot. Real estate in Boise is insane, especially right now. And you kind of have the options of you're either going to be like a venue that has like another gimmick on top of it, like you're a roller rink that has shows every once in a while, or you're going to sell alcohol. And selling alcohol, nothing wrong with that, but it's really hard to do here. Not because it's like a no alcohol state, but liquor licensing here is ridiculous. It's
Right.
so difficult to do. And you're basically almost guaranteed to get a 21 at park, which we've got a million 21 at venues. They're all awesome, but we didn't want to do that. We wanted to have an all ages space. So we were like, that's our ticket. It's like, if we go nonprofit, we don't have to like go through all of these other things and find another way to keep the doors open. We could use the tax exempt status, and we can create basically like a space that we just give back to the city. So yeah, kind of once we were talking about real art, that was kind of like the switch point where we were like, oh, we're not just talking about this anymore. Like I'm on the IRS's website trying to figure out like what we need to do. And then we met a couple other people, and it just snowballed. And now here we are. Like we're doing it.
Yeah. So like just to give more education for people listening as well as myself, like what is like the actual things to be considered to be a nonprofit and that whole like 901 like whatever the number sequence is there.
Yeah. So basically, what it is like a 501c3 nonprofit status basically means we're tax exempt. It basically runs us similar to a way like a charity runs in the U.S. So none of anyone who works for, and I put that in air quotes because we're volunteer run, but none of us take a salary. None of us take anything. Jason and I and everybody else on the board will never see a dime from us. We don't care. We don't want to. Every dollar that comes into Underdogs as a venue goes either back out to bands or goes into making this space for people to come into.
Gotcha.
We don't, we're all still working jobs. That's not going to change. We're never taking a penny from this. A nonprofit basically means any money that goes in goes back out, either in the form of making the space bigger and better, or paying bands or doing community events and things like that. It's all in and out. We don't take a cut. So that's the biggest thing. That's basically what a nonprofit is.
Yeah. So it's not like you're taking your share and then you become the deal or no deal like bank guy in the upper loft.
Exactly.
Like...
as much as I'd like to be, that's not how this works. And
right.
And we didn't want it to. I think honestly, we would have, even if it was like financially feasible for us to like make a for-profit venue, I don't think we would have. I think that would have stayed in the kitchen. It would have just been a 1 a.m. conversation. But once we found a way to do it where it's like, yo, we can just facilitate a venue that is smaller, so bands can get paid, nobody loses their ass on a guarantee or a venue cut, and making it a guaranteed all ages space where it's literally like, yo, you want to be a part of this? Boom, here you go. There's no barrier of entry. You want to play music? We've got gear on stage. Hop up there. We want to do a full backline and everything like that. We wanted to basically just build it out so it's like, yo, this is what we wanted as kids. This is the stuff that we were missing out on. It's yours now. Have fun.
Right. Well, what I like about that is that it's way more like community enabling because it's not like focusing on like, oh, we need the fanciest shit, like, or we need people to be doing this. It's like we're just creating the place for people to come and gather and like break bread if you want to even like go to that degree. But like I love that idea that it's like because in the video of you guys, I guess announcing this for the GoFundMe, it's like very intentional about like that being a place for people to learn as well as like just like spend time together.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing I'm really excited about, finally getting this thing open, because we've been working on this since like the beginning of this year. Is basically, and it's funny because like how we were talking about if somebody wants to get into hardcore, what are the 3 records to give them? It's like, fuck that. If you want to get into some cool music, go to Underdogs. Like you'll find something, or you'll find someone. If you want to start a band, you'll find someone there. If you want to learn about some cool new music, or you found this new band that sounds a little different and you want to figure out what it is, well, they're playing at Underdogs. Go there and check out everything. And yeah, it's definitely the community aspect is huge for us. And I think that's like I think that brings it back to Boise too. Is like we're too small of a scene for everyone to not know each other to begin with. So we might as well all get together and do this ourselves. And we don't have like a fuck you, we're going to do it out our way attitude per se. Well, we kind of do, because it was like, despite all of the bullshit, despite how many DIY venues have gotten shut down here since we started going to shows, despite how hard it is to keep doors open without selling alcohol or going 21 up, it's like, yeah, no, we don't care. We're going to do this. We're going to do it our way. We're going to give it back to you, and you guys just have fun.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you bringing back to the earlier piece of that, because you could just give a new person getting into this music a couple dope records, but that to me is just the curiosity level what
Mhm.
I've heard from everyone who's come on this podcast and almost everyone within hardcore that I've talked to, it's about going to that first show where you experience the energy, you experience like how people react to that kind of music, what you actually feel. Like you could listen to a record and feel like I feel like you only get the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
When you're in the room when it's happening, it's like the whole goddamn iceberg.
It actually makes me want to recant what I was saying earlier about how, like, if you listen to Just Another Day and you get it, like, congratulations, you're in. It's like, nah, maybe it's just the first step. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, cool. If you like Just Another Day, awesome. All right, go see the hardcore show at
Right.
Underdogs tonight. That's how you know. Because, like, truth be told, maybe you don't like that record. Maybe you're not a big Mind Force guy, whatever. But if you enter that room and you see the hardcore show and you're like, something about this room feels right, then you're in. And
Right.
truth be told, Underdogs is not just going to be a hardcore venue. We want to do everything. We don't want to pigeonhole ourselves to hardcore because, like, hardcore's sick, but it gets old kind of quick sometimes. And there's so many cool other genres that we want to have there that kind of run into the same problem in Boise, where it's like they can't fill one of the bigger rooms. If they don't want to be playing at a 21 venue, we don't want to leave all these kids out. So, yeah, it's definitely all sorts of genres, but just DIY to the core.
Mm-hmm. So with that being said, because there are a lot of awesome venues that are either infamous or wildly known throughout the states, that are like very DIY, but they don't have that like we're an official place where you can actually book shows. So how
Yeah.
has that not like balance, but like how has that been like? Oh, why can't we just do this? But it's like, okay, well, because we are a nonprofit on paper, we can't go that DIY, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so I mean, there's the nice part about it is the nonprofit part allows us to do a couple things, but it doesn't restrict us a ton on what we want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, it just means that we don't get paid, and that's fine. But a big thing it does is it allows us to basically be run off of like donations. So that's why we launched the GoFundMe, and we're gonna have some
Yeah.
other ways for people to help us and support us and stuff. But as far as like doing what we want or other ways to get going, I mean, we kind of have free range. We just
Okay.
don't get paid, and that's again, we don't care. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
we'll work day jobs that because at the end of the day, going to a show is like the kind of like cool. The work day is over. I get to have fun now. So I think if it became my job, it would suck too much anyway. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think there's like a ton of limitations to what we can do, and that's sick because I mean, this will come out as we get closer to opening, but we've built like programming and stuff for like basically like fundraisers for ourselves to help us keep open, but like they're also like community activities, and we've
Mm-hmm.
got it like for a full year from when we open. So it'll be sick because we get to do some of the fun things that you might have seen like some other DIY news do. Like I, I'll let one slip. I really want to do like a one of those like fundraiser like sports games where we just get a bunch of people in the scene to like play like football, and I want to call it like the 10-yard fight, and we just all play like football and like raise
Sick.
money for like the venue or like to upgrade gear or something.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, stuff like that we're going to be doing all the time.
Yeah. What's uh like so talk to me about your specific role, because I think your title is like executive director and VP, which let me just is sick.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot of I don't know if there's like certain people that have been like, oh, you're just big, like where's your suit and tie,
Yeah,
Alex?
for sure, for sure. Yeah, it feels weird to like say that or like have that in certain things. A lot of it is not like smoke and mirrors, but it's just kind of like filling in the lines for the IRS.
Totally. Yeah,
Because
yeah.
like to have a nonprofit in the U.S., you have to have like 4 board members. You have to have a president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer, which we all filled out, and we take on those roles. And like we have like the cool names for it, so that when we go to a business, we can go like, "Hey, I'm the executive director and vice president of Underdogs." They're
Right.
not like because I can't go in like, "Hey, I'm wearing a Cranberries t-shirt. Will you give me like several $100s to open a venue?" And then go, "Yeah, the cops are on their way." But if I hand them something a little bit more professional, maybe they're willing to work with us. So at the end of the day, I can rock the Cranberries t-shirt to the show at the venue that we can keep open. So as
Yeah.
far as like what it actually means, so the vice president part isn't like a ton. Basically, as far as like the IRS goes, like the way nonprofits go, I basically just back up Jason, who is our president. The executive director part is a little bit more of what I do, and in reality, that just means I'm kind of like running the day-to-day operations.
Mhm.
I've been doing, I've been booking shows for the last like 4 or 5 years. So I'll be doing a lot of the booking at the venue. I work with our volunteer director on making sure like volunteers get involved and having everything situated. So I'm basically just like running the day-to-day operations. It's just kind of a fancy title.
Yeah. But you're totally right. Like, you can't just be like, okay, who's the business owner? You're like, oh, I guess I'm the main guy, or like one of the main guys.
Yeah.
Like, it's very interesting when I saw all that, because like I'm very much in the mix of like kind of trying to find some of those things when it comes to scope, where it's like, yes, like scoped is a DIY thing that me and a bunch of friends started to help document, but now it's like, well, we're just starting to play in a different field now, where it's like
Yeah.
people that want to sponsor us financially, like like being able to work with like actual businesses in doing different projects. So it's like, oh, I guess like I have to right, CEO, when it comes to scoped
Yeah.
exposure,
Exactly.
whatever. But like, that's the thing. And anyone that, I knew that you probably expected like me having my name and this fucking surname with it is probably gonna just be a goof. But like at the same time, it's like it's needed for what you guys are doing.
Yeah, I can't imagine it would, but if anyone did like try to check me on it, it's like, yeah, I get it. Like vice president isn't very punk, but like fuck you. Like where's your venue? Uh,
Exactly,
I
exactly.
feel like anyone who knows like knows. You know what I mean? Like if I saw Spencer CEO of Subject Twitter, I wouldn't bat an eyelash. Like truth be told, like most of the people who listen to this, most of your favorite hardcore bands, they have an LLC. Like if they're
Right.
if they're playing like major fests or like they're doing big tours, they're probably registered as a business. It's just how it goes.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, they can be your favorite band, but you know what's not punk is like getting fucked over by the IRS for like thousands of dollars in taxes. Like sometimes you gotta play ball so you can keep doing the things you want. But yeah, especially in like a nonprofit space. Again, none of us are getting paid. It's a title, so that way when I go to some like business and it's like, hey, like we want to work with you, like we want to do like community outreach programs, we want to reach for volunteers. Like again, if I'm the guy in the death metal shirt, not a lot of credibility. If I come in with these titles and the IRS sees, yeah, hey, this is the vice president, here's all their stuff, they're not going to like revoke our 501c3 status and we get to keep having shows.
Yeah. I think there is something to be said though, where where people can still, run some kind of business, whatever that is, and be professional, but they can still be themselves. They can still show up
Yeah.
with a Cranberries t-shirt or a Disturbed shirt. But
Yes.
they're like, I know the shit that I'm talking about and I can be
Yeah.
myself. There's, you know, there's always things that at the beginning feel like, oh, that's just a little too crazy. Like, you go back 10 years and people were like, oh, you have tattoos, you might not be professional, but like that has
Yeah.
totally flipped in that
Absolutely.
time frame.
Yeah.
So no, it's really cool. What is so the thing that's also interesting to me is you saying like how like the the smaller details, like, oh, like we're just gonna own a backline. Like, what were some of those things when you were talking about it versus like, oh, we're just gonna be a box with four walls, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, as appealing as a box with four walls is, because it's kind of like, yeah, just choose your own adventure, set it up however you like. Um, we all kind of thought like there were certain things. Really, what it came back to is we thought about like some of the venues we used to have here. Like there was this one really cool spot called the Boise venue, which was called the venue, and it was a sick room, and it was not that expensive to book. They were like, damn, I wish kids today had like a Boise venue. I wish they had the Crux. Like we used to go to shows there. And it's like, okay, so let's do this. Let's think about all the things we had that we're missing, and let's give it to them. Let's think of all the things that we wish we would have had as kids or would have made us that much more excited to go to shows all the time, and let's put it there. So like, yeah, a box of four walls that's a nonprofit, so that way it's not expensive and like a lot of DIY bands can go through. That's what we had, and that's what we want to give back. Something we
Mhm.
didn't have is a full backline. It's like we talked about it, it's like, yeah, we all had to like work really hard and like buy expensive gear, and then it breaks and you're just like, well, I'm fucked. And it's like, how sick would it be if like you're, some 17-year-old kid, you just found that never ending game record, you just found that darker half, the big kiss goodnight, and you and your friends started a shitty band, you all got line 6 amps, your drum kit's falling apart. Well, it's like, you know what? How about we do something nice that's like, cool, hop up there. There's an 810 on stage, there's two Marshall cabinets, there's a full drum kit, just go nuts. Or even to put it more bluntly, is to kind of remove that financial barrier. Some people have bad gear because they can't afford it. That's not their fault. They should be able to play a show and not sound like, not sound bad.
Right.
We want to take that barrier of entry away from them. So hop up there. There's a fully rig there for you. Just rock. Just have fun. Another big thing for us is being an inclusive, safe space. All of our board members are about to take it. I've already been certified in it. All of our board members are about to take it. And every volunteer we have will have certified safe space training with an outside partner. I've worked with one of our board members, two of our board members to orchestrate that. There's an outside company that basically provides like a safe space training to certify everyone. Because another thing here is like there are a couple of venues here that are awesome places, but some people don't feel comfortable. Some people don't feel represented in that room. And it's, again, removing that barrier of entry. Like, there's no reason that anyone shouldn't be able to walk into a space here in Boise and play a show. So we're going to remove every barrier we can. We're just going to give everyone the stuff that we had and we want you to have, and all the stuff we didn't have. So things like that are, I think, what makes this like way more important to us. Because, like, yeah, box of four walls for hardcore, sick. Like that sounds ideal to me. If I walk into a room on tour, if I walk into a room and it's just like an empty box of four walls, I'm all sick. This is gonna be a cool time. But I think there's certain things that we can do, and we almost feel like obligated to do, to give like the next generation of like kids to shows. And there's a lot of young kids coming to shows now, but it's like we want to give you every opportunity where like you walk in and you're ready to go. If you want to be a part of this, like you don't. There's nothing you got to do except want.
Yeah, I think having that intent, like in those details, like is so huge. Because like like we've all played a festival that like, has a couple, they're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna bring a couple amps, and then people are like, oh shit, like, do you have the speaker cable that matches this? And you're like going around, you're asking all these favors.
Yeah.
And the show happens and the show goes on, but like, I'm sure tons of people listening are like, man, I want to go play Underdogs, because the fact that I only have to bring heads or my breakables, like that is speaking to me.
Yeah.
But
your lower back is going to love Underdogs.
So there's that side of it, but like I don't have much experience when it comes to booking shows, but like through the small events that we've done through for Scoped and the anniversary events, it's like even just like having a sign, like certain signs that just a land acknowledgement, or like, hey, these are gender neutral bathrooms, like just like doing those small things, like to me, I'm like, oh, like I think this would be a good idea, but then to like see it like touch a person so much that they're like putting it on their story, and like like things like that's helped like putting things out there. So like sometimes you need to, yes, four walls, people in hardcore can make that work, and we've seen that time and time again. But I think when you're putting your name clearly tied to something, you want it to go even further than that, to show how much you care about, again, like the next generation of Boise musicians, really.
Yeah, and like it's a nice thought to think like we're doing what we can, and like we want to. But when we started talking about some of these things, like the safe space training and things like that, bringing that back line, because just like obviously it's sick for a band on tour. Even if you have all the gear, to just kind of like leave the cabs in the van, like take a night off from bringing all that stuff. But like really what it comes down to is like there are people in this city and all over anywhere that's like they don't have some of the access to these things that they need, and they're gonna fight with that shit in the rest of the world. Like the one place they shouldn't have to is a place like this, like a place where like your gender identity is your gender identity and nobody's going to take that away from you. Should be a place where there's a hardcore band playing, where there's like a DIY band playing, like, because like that shit's not for me. Like I have every privilege in the world. I'm blessed with everything I am, but some people don't get afforded those same things, and like they shouldn't have any less access to a cool ass venue or like a cool show than I do. So I think it's like we've all kind of decided like it's our responsibility. It's not just like isn't this a nice idea? Like, yeah, it's so sick to see that, and like I love the way people think of it. Like we were like we can't just do four walls, because like we owe it to the rest of the city to let them have what they want and feel safe, feel comfortable, feel like they have access to it. So it's really important to us. It's got to happen.
Yeah, I really like that you added that word in there, responsibility, because it's
Yeah.
so easy to stand on stage and be like, "This is a safe space for people. Everyone
Yeah.
should feel welcome." But like, unless you're actually doing stuff actually like to stand by that and
Yeah.
like prove, like you're putting it on the wall in some cases, and then you're actually standing by it when you're running into situations. Like, what's like in that safe space training that you're doing, like what's been has there been any like ahas or like, oh, I've never really thought about approaching a situation like that or setting this up so this doesn't happen?
I think being in hardcore and DIY a lot, I think I learned pretty early on, like a lot of the things that maybe to like a kind of like normie or some people call them civilians, like people outside of this stuff,
Right,
there would
right.
probably be a lot of aha moments. I think that training tells a lot of stuff that like I and probably a lot of us already know because we've been in that.
Sure.
But it's not just like about that because like we're gonna have volunteers, kids who are just getting into this that maybe will have those aha moments. Things about like you know not assuming people's pronouns. Uh, I think there was kind of a one aha point where it was like, oh, that's a good idea to think about was like having like pronoun pins like on our like ID badges and stuff if we can get that. It's like
Hmm.
things like that where it's like it's so small that you might overlook it, especially like if you're pretty comfortable with these things. But again, like it's small because like I've never been misgendered. It's stuff that it's like, but somebody who has been, that's going to be important to them. That's something they're going to really want. And our volunteers may not know that. People coming into this for the first time may not know that. So having that training is really, for me, it wasn't an aha moment, but it was like, oh yeah, this is a reminder of like what this might mean to somebody. And like this could be the difference between somebody like never coming to a show again and finding a space where they feel like they could be themselves.
Yeah, yeah. I really like that, just again, going above and beyond to just like make it very apparent like this is where we stand on these things. And
Yeah.
it all you're doing is just adding a couple extra to words
Yeah.
per volunteer. So, yeah. But I do think that, a lot of that for being in hardcore and punk, as long as you or I have, is like very instilled in you. But it's like the people that it's maybe their first volunteer time is like maybe their first show, and they're like, oh,
Yeah.
I didn't know that this was a thing.
Yeah, people love to talk shit about like TikTok kids getting into hardcore, and like, yeah, there's some problems with it, but like the fact of the matter is, like, some of those kids are going to stick around for a while, and they're, it's culture shock to them, just like it was culture shock to me when I saw Charlie two-stepping at a show for the first time. I was like, what the hell is that? It's like some people haven't been around the shit like we have, and
Right.
in that same space, it's not an excuse to not be aware of like, you know, things that are really important to people like their gender identity and making sure it's a safe space, but it's like it's our responsibility to educate them on that and make sure that we're facilitating a space like that. So you know some people just don't know and you got to make them learn.
Yeah. So you also mentioned that, like, obviously, which I think is a smart play, to not only do like hardcore related
Yeah.
things. So it's all the stuff outside of that. Like, is it still all going to be music, or will there be other quote unquote types of events that Underdogs is going to be hosting or being the space for?
That's a good question. So I think it's definitely a venue first. Like I think
Hmm.
that's like our main goal of it. But I think as we've built this out, we've come to realize that we don't just want to do music, but we don't have any plans for it per se. Like obviously shows are going to be the focus, but we've almost talked about it coming to like almost like a community server level where like if we get into a space that has enough room, like I want to put like pool tables in there or like have like couches, and like it'd be sick if it was something where it was not only just a space where like at the end of the workday or the end of the school day you go to hang out, but it's like, on weekends, like I can go to a space where like I feel like that can be me, or like I can meet people that think like me. It's like I'm gonna go to Underdogs. Like
Hmm.
that's definitely the area we're trying to create. So yeah, shows are gonna be the main thing, but we want to do all sorts of shit, and especially because like it helps us keep our doors open to do like different fundraising activities. Like we want to do like potlucks and all sorts of different things. So yeah, it's gonna be a venue first, but it's gonna be a lot more.
Yeah. No, I love that idea that like a kid could just be, on whatever is just hanging out on the same night of like a hardcore show, and then they're like, oh, maybe I'll stick around to see this.
Yeah,
And then, fast forward 5-10 years later, they're fronting one of the biggest bands that's going on tour, Blink 182, like
exactly.
those type of potentials, like that's where my mind runs wild. So it's so easy, like you said, to like shit on people that are finding out about this stuff through TikTok, but like I think there's going to be a generation of kids that like start some of the sickest bands that we see when we're like, oh man, like I only have time for one band these days versus, the 3 or 4 that you're currently in. So,
Yeah.
it's cool. It's cool to see.
Yeah, I think going back to like the TikTok thing, it's like I get why that shit's annoying and I don't disagree, but it's like the hardcore is really cool about like policing itself or like kind of weeding itself out. Like the ones that will be around for a time or two, like they'll find their own way out. They won't come back, and it's just because it's not for them. Like you don't have to be a dick about it. And like we basically just want to like provide that medium where it's like, yo, come check this out. If you go to a hardcore show and it's not for you, chill, no worries. Like it's not for everybody. Not everybody else's type of music or scenes are my cup of tea either. But there's gonna be a couple kids that find out about that shit through TikTok. They might come to a show here and they're going to see Ingrown and they're going to get blown away because there's going to be kids throwing trash cans and doing cartwheels off stage and shit. And they're going to go, you know what? This is for me. And it's like, cool, man, you're in.
So off of that point, because again, I think this was the question I was trying to ask as far as like, okay, we're this non-for-profit space, but we still want to have the ultra DIY like rules. So are there things where you want like, are you? I'm not saying encourage what kind of behavior you want at these shows that Underdogs will be doing eventually, but like, is that going to be a thing where it's like this necessarily wouldn't fly at like the bigger name Boise venue?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
But here it's like we understand. Okay, and here's where my brain is going. When Promcore 2021 happened, the guy that owns the Vanguard where it happened that year, like played in Peace of Mind. He played in hardcore bands. So like when people started throwing trash, but then immediately start picking up, he's like, that's what it's all about. But mostly any other venue would be like, you're throwing trash, the fucking show's over. Blah, blah,
yeah,
blah.
for sure. I got you. Yeah, so it's funny because like the thing I think about immediately is the policy we wrote about moshing. I spent like fucking 3 hours. It's on our website. It's like
Okay.
It's like funny how like insanely detailed it is. Like it looks like borderline neurotic. But yeah, we were at this point where it's like, okay, like we do have like a responsibility because like we're liable sometimes for those people that are in that room. So,
well,
like,
yeah, exactly. That's why I'm asking that question. Yeah.
Yeah. There's like a big policy thing on our website about moshing, stage diving, anything like that. Because I remember like the old Boise venue, they had a sign that said no stage diving. And it was just like, cool, that sign's up there. So like if you do it, it's your fault. But other than that, like just do it. Like who fucking cares? Like the owners weren't like shutting shows down for it. It's like, hey, the sign's up there. You break your arm, fuck you. Like that sucks.
Right.
And like we have to be a little bit more careful about that. But yeah, like we have it's basically this big policy on our website is like, hey, like you need to know like what kind of room you're entering and you need to be careful about like, the things that goes on. Like obviously if you're walking the show for the first time, you may not know what's going on. So it's like we have stuff all over. We'll have stuff up in the venue too. It's like, hey, if there's a heavy band playing, there may be some like aggressive dancing on there. Like there may be people jumping off the stage. There may be people moshing a way that you aren't used to. Cause like everybody knows the age old battle of push moshing versus hardcore dancing. Like we don't want to play that game. We don't want to have that fight. It's on our website and everything where it's like, hey, like if you're walking in this room, like you have a responsibility yourself to be safe. We will keep you safe as best we can, but like know what you're walking into. And it's to the point where it's like there's stuff on there where it's like, hey, like if you are seeing somebody like moshing and they're bothering you, you need to step aside. If they're continuing to bother you, come find us. We'll mediate the situation. Like it's not like we're saying like hands off, like fuck you, buddy, it's your game. Cause like that's just not how reality works. But we're also not gonna be cops about it. And I think in there it says like the way you react to music is your expression. And that's the most important part about music is how it makes you feel and how it makes you move. So like, we're not taking that away from everyone. We just also want everyone to be safe.
Yeah. Like it's funny that you say like how people react to music is so individual because on the surface, someone could be like, oh, this guy just came out of nowhere and like jumped on me and then like, something happened. But like literally I've had people on this podcast that are like, front flipping out of pure joy when they hear this fucking breakdown hit. So like it's that could be cheesy as fuck to say, but like that is a reality for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And like I want to always be in a culture of hardcore that's like that has that like oh, it's not just violent because people want to like be dangerous. It's like people are like violent because like the riffs are so hard and people are just like in that fray.
Yeah.
And I talk about it all the time of just like people of all ages, whether they're first getting into this shit or they're 40 years old and they've heard every, breakdown imaginable, just need to practice constant self-awareness of like, oh, someone's
Yeah.
moshing into me. I'm gonna go to the back of the room, or I'm not gonna stand at the front of the pit with a beer in
Yeah.
hand and get mad when it's spin kicked out of my hand.
Yeah.
When I've been watching people do that for the past 30 seconds. It's
Yeah.
it's interesting being the person that documents shows because I kind of have like a bird's eye view of like everyone who's watching the band and then the band playing, and
Mhm.
naturally like I'll see like, oh, there's a dude that like clearly is just aggressively crowd killing people but isn't like doing anything else like in between those quote unquote parts. So I don't know, it's people need to just like read the room and then like govern themselves like you were saying.
Yeah, yeah. It's easy to get kind of not narrow-minded, maybe a little harsh or accusatory. But like it's easy to get kind of liners when like you go to a lot of hardcore shows, or maybe you only go to hardcore shows. It's like cool, you know that situation day in day out. Like you know where
Mhm.
you want to stand. You know what kind of dancing you're gonna do. If you're gonna be moshing, if you're a stage dive kind of person, if you're a chill in the back, side stage, like you kind of get that. We don't get afforded that because we're not just booking hardcore shows. I mean, and Boise hasn't had been able to afford that for a long time because so many of our shows are mixed in with like the Boise death metal community. That's
Right.
what makes Boise pop half the time anymore is working with some of the death metal bands here that are awesome.
Yeah.
So like we had to, you have to take those blinders off if you're going to open a venue because like again, it's this room is on the line. This everything we've worked for is on the line. So on the same token where it's like, hey, when you're walking into a room, get an idea of like what's going on here, choose where you're going to stand strategically. But there's also the other side where it's like, hey, like if you're 6'5", 250, I don't care who's playing, leave the 15-year-old girl alone. It's
Right.
like there's a responsibility on both ends. And like we all, the lifers, as it were, like we get that. We know when to
Yes.
mosh, where to mosh, like things like that. We know how to keep a room safe. Sometimes it sucks, man. There's gonna be that 35-year-old mom who's recording in the middle of the pit. Doesn't mean you kick her in the face. Sorry. Like you're gonna have to sit this one out. You'll be all right. Like,
Right.
yeah, that person should know, but sometimes they don't. So like, yeah, there's kind of like a handshake you gotta do with the outside and inside world of hardcore in order for us to thrive in the space. Because the bottom line is like, yeah, a hardcore only venue kind of sounds sick in theory, but A, that venue is going to close in 6 months because there's no way you're
Right.
keeping doors open.
Yeah.
B, in practice, that actually sounds miserable. I want to hear not hardcore sometimes. So
Right.
it's kind of a mutual agreement. And that's how it's like worded on our policies on the website. It's like, hey, like know where you're going to stand. But, like if you're going to dance, know what you're doing. Because like if you're crowd killing and there's a bunch of 18-year-old kids who are at their first show, I'm going to kick you out. Like you can't do that. So
Right.
it's,
Especially
there's
no
kind of an
one else is
understanding.
cr- is crowd killing.
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah,
yeah, if this band's playing a Blink 182 cover and you're crowd rolling, we have a problem. Most of the time, that's like not a huge issue, but sometimes people get excited. It's the same thing where it's like music makes you move, music makes you dance. If it's
Mhm.
good, it makes you want to do something.
Yeah.
But you got to have self control. It's situational awareness.
Okay, so you brought up the 35-year-old mom recording in the middle of the pit when
Yeah,
the dopest two-stepping is like could be happening. Sometimes I'm a little confused. It's like, is it just that's the way it is, so everyone's gotta like, sit this one out, like you said? Or is there something on the venue to be like, maybe tap that like person on the shoulder in between a song and be like, hey, can you come up? Because I've been to a festival where the band prior clearly had someone who was like the 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 S tier level of drunk that you could ever imagine, and like standing on stage and like pulling the vocal, and the vocalist was being very patient about it. I will say that. By the next band that played, she got like smoked and like
yeah,
knocked out, and it derailed the festival by like 30 minutes. So I was
yeah,
thinking, I'm like, is there an alternate timeline where someone running the fest comes in, make sure that we don't have a repeat of that, or something like that?
yeah.
Where does your mind go with a situation like that?
I think that's like it's unfortunately I give you the dumb answer of it depends, but
Sure.
really it does. Like I think of it this way: it's like okay, like these 16-year-old kids are playing their first show. They're playing like a hardcore set. Like, they all got into hardcore. Their mom's in the pit, but they're recording. It's like, you know what? All the scene veterans can take a fucking smoke break. They can sit down for a little bit. Like, you'll be fine if you don't mosh for this. If it's something where there's somebody who's like almost like deliberately getting in the way of people dancing and stuff, yeah, that might be a conversation. Like, and it's not gonna be like fucked up. Like, obviously, we're not gonna like beat the hell out of somebody or physically
Right.
touch them at all. Really, it's like, hey, like this is kind of like a dangerous area to be standing. If you want to record, like, yo, let me get you on stage, or like let me put you here, or like this is probably a better place for you to stand.
Mm-hmm.
Just because, like, yeah, obviously, I dance from time to time. I think it's fun. I hate it when, there's a cool two-step part and mom's got her fucking phone out, she's recording. But ultimately, like, are you going to survive if you don't get to hit that mosh? Yeah, you're going to be fine. But, like,
Yeah.
in the face, we have a problem. So, like, I think it's a little bit more, I tend to lean towards the sides. Like, it sucks, but, like, grow up. But yeah, if somebody's like grabbing somebody on stage, like, you're gone. Like, you're not going to like fuck up the show for everyone else. It's just
Right.
like, yeah, man, like sometimes you didn't get to hit that awesome cartwheel. Like, I know the photographer was going to get it, man. Like, your profile picture would have been dope, but it's like, cool, now we get to have shows here. So, like, I think you'll be all right.
Right. But yeah, I really think that it's totally like a situational thing. But yeah, sometimes there have been, again, like, I think lifers know, like, okay, I'm doing X, so that means that I can stand in certain places. And like I've told I've ha- I've had to kind of like stop what I'm doing in order to be able to, like, hey, you're blocking people from coming in by
Yeah.
standing here and doing this. Or like, and I'm not mad about it. I'm just trying to make sure that like a flow can
Yeah.
happen versus like there's a bottleneck.
Yeah, I've definitely been like in a spot where like there'll be a show where it's like, especially like mixed bills, that happens a lot where like there'll be like a hardcore band. It's like, I want to dance. Like, maybe there's like that one person that's standing in the way. I'm definitely the type of person to like tap me, like, here. And it's like,
Yeah.
you can do that. Like, that's not confrontational. Like, you're looking out for that person's safety. And like, I can't imagine, somebody who didn't already have a chip on their shoulder to begin with, like getting fucked up with you about like they're
Right.
not going to care. They'll be like, oh, cool, thank you, because like either their screen's going to get cracked or like they're going to get hurt. It's like you don't want that. So yeah, I mean, doing shit like that is bordering on just like your responsibility. Because yeah, if you're going to fucking hit some crazy move, man, like again, don't kick the 35-year-old mom in the face. Otherwise, she's not going to let her kids come here. She's going to make a big stake about this. Then if it's a smaller
She's
venue
gonna
or
go on
something that's
Facebook Live and it'll be game
exactly,
over.
yeah, you don't want your venue on Facebook Live. Never
Yeah.
in a million years is a good idea. So yeah, I think it's just like again, it's that kind of like social handshake where it's like, if and you know how to like be respectful, your responsibility in it. And I trust like everyone, like the lifers, like the true people in Boise that have like been going to shows for a long time, like we all know how to keep a room safe and do everything. And that's again part of why we feel like it's our responsibility to build this. It's like, cool, we know. So like, let's educate other people and like let's create a room where like, I've gotten injuries at shows. Like, I remember getting my nose broken during Alpha and Omega when I was 16. And it's like I was, still kind of fresh into hardcore. It's like, that's a wake up call. But it's like, luckily, my parents weren't there, so they didn't like freak out. And it's like sometimes you might not get that lucky, so everyone's got to be careful. But
Right.
I think I'm not truthfully as worried about it. I mean, I know I'm going to put my foot in my mouth and we're going to have some crazy show and someone's going to get fucking GoFundMe or something, but we'll cross that bridge. But we're keeping a balance. Like, yes, we're not just doing hardcore shows, but we're doing hardcore shows.
I would argue that the fact of how much diligence that y'all are putting into it, I'm sure that if and when GoFundMe happens, I'm sure it will happen much later than that, because I totally agree that the quicker that something is set up where it's like ultra DIY, the it doesn't have that sustainability. Like, it can't go for as long as you want it to.
Yeah.
And the way that it sounds like you guys are setting this up is like, we want this to not only like be here for the long haul, but we want this to make an impact in that, like, like we can almost like pass this venue off to like the next generation. It just goes on forever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's a big thing for us. Like we talked about, it's like, what's our like long-term plan? Is like, we're gonna set this up. We're gonna do it for a couple of years, and then we want someone else to take over. Like, if you want to learn how to book shows, like I want to teach people how to do that. That's another thing with our volunteer program is like, volunteers is not just like, refilling the water jug or like taking tickets at the door. It's like, if you want to learn how to book shows, like, cool, let's fucking do it. Like, help me book the show, or like, reach out to this band. Like,
Make
not
a
in like a weird,
connection. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, and not like a weird like I'm your dad or like I know better than you way, but it's like, some people don't know. Like when I started booking shows, I remember asking this guy Robbie who used to book shows here a lot. I was like, I don't know the first thing about this. And it's like some people may not know a Robbie. Some people may have no idea. It's like some people may like want to hit up their favorite band and see if they'll play here, but like they don't know how all this shit works. They don't know how to do it in the spots. So like, yeah, we'll fucking teach you like do it. Like that sounds sick. Like let's book your band, let's book your friend's band, let's book your favorite band. If you want to learn how to do lights and sound, we want to have like those opportunities. That's a big part of like why we want like all these like volunteers. Because again, we're not doing this because like we love the business aspect of it. We're doing it because like we want a room, a venue that we can build the way it should have been when we were kids, the way we liked it when we were kids and getting into this. We're going to give it every opportunity. We're going to, here you go, have fun.
Yeah. Well, like I talk about it all the time, and I'm sure lots of people can agree to this sentiment. Is like I've learned so much when it comes to just like life in general through hardcore, and that's
Yeah.
anything of like, oh, like I can do this despite the odds and despite the obstacles in my way, as well as like, oh, this is how I carry myself when I do this. Here's a technical skill that I've been able to pick up because I've like, been playing so many shows. Even just like the logistical, like, oh, we have this like huge lineup and like we need to be out of here in 10 minutes. Like literally everyone grab a piece of gear and get this shit out of here. So
Yeah.
like there's so many things that I'm excited for you to like be able to like to teach all these new kids, like whether it's lighting, like filming shows, like because I know you have a bit of like a video like background as well, where it can be like,
Yeah.
hey, don't be the annoying person like trying to shoot like this crazy thing. If you want to film the entire band, like here's a good place for you to stand, and this is how you do, your sound, to make sure the audio isn't clipping. Like to me, this is like so cool that the amount of like different things that you'll be able to teach all these new kids and leave a lasting impact for Boise, just the music scene in general is really exciting. And obviously like this is the entire team, not just you, but
Yeah.
you're the
I
one on the
mean, yeah.
podcast.
Yeah, for sure. Exactly. No, and I like you said, like the kind of like learning things like in spite of, or like, avoiding those barriers. Like that's part of why I think we were all drawn to the name Underdogs. Like on top of it just being like a terror reference, it was like Boise's been an underdog city since day one. Like we have tours skip us all the time. We have shows fall through. We have venues collapse and stuff. Like it just seems like we can't catch a break half the time. But like in spite of that, we're just like, nah, fuck you. Like if we can't find a venue, we're gonna go play a show in the desert and 125 people are gonna come. If we only have one other all ages venue and it's just to the point where like they want to do metal shows or like it's just expensive to book like the smaller bands here, well fuck it, we're gonna open our own venue. It's very like
Totally.
we've always been an underdog city, and it's like we're just gonna kind of own that. I think that's like I think that's kind of like hard coded in like we see hardcore in general is like I think that kind of like just like chin like taking on the chin attitude makes me love hardcore so much and like DIY so much is like again there's nothing wrong with like having a big city having a thriving hardcore scene, but it's like we had to work for it. And like sometimes, shows still get shot here every once in a while. Sometimes there's a bad turnout, like there is everywhere. But it's like in spite of how many bad turnouts there were, how many bands skipped over us, like we're just doing it anyway. And now it's the point where I think Ingrown represents that well. It's like, who the fuck heard of a band coming out of Boise? Well, Ingrown went, we don't fucking care. You're going to pay attention to us. And now you don't look anywhere hardcore without seeing Ingrown. It's like, that's what's up. That's how it
Right.
should be. Same thing with Boise is like a tour stop. It's like, you want to skip Boise, like you're going to regret it because you're going to see the videos. You're going to see all these bands about, Boise, that's what's up. Like this show is crazy. It's like, in spite of everything, like we're just going to make this cool and you're going to have to deal with it.
Yeah, like so many people listen to this podcast from those pockets that don't have their scene handed to them. And for
Yeah.
me, something that I have always reminded myself is like, because half the time I'm like, who the fuck is like paying it? Like, it blows my mind to like take a step back and be like, man, people are checking out. Like, I think that being unique and being different helps like you not to get lost in the sea of how
Yeah.
many things like I there are so many great bands from California. If you showed me a new thing and they're like, oh yeah, this band's from LA, it's almost like less cool for me. But if it's like this band's from Salt Lake, or this band's from Milwaukee, or this band's from like St. Louis, Missouri, I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, tell me more, you know? So
Yeah, for sure.
I believe that like despite you coming from any kind of underdog scene, Boise or anywhere else, like own that and like create the change that you want to see. Like this conversation with you, Alex, has really like just put a fire in me on just like the stuff that I'm already doing with Scope and the future stuff I want to do. And I'm sure other people listening are feeling amped up about, you know, doing being the change they want to see.
I fucking hope so. Cause like in the same way that it's like, it's easy to kind of get like on the other hand, like it's easy to get it wrapped and go, well, Boise's always had it hard. And it's like, there's nothing wrong with like a big scene because like, the Bay had to build it just like we did. Like just because that, it's working for them doesn't mean it can't work for anyone else. Or it doesn't mean like, I know so many people from like the Bay and from New York and like where these shows happen. It's like those people put in all the time in the same we did. So like on the one hand, it's like it's cool to have the attitude. It's like, well, like we're not a big city. Our hardcore shows don't pop, but like we're gonna make it that way. It's like it's the same way where it's like, if you're a Milwaukee, if you're a Salt Lake, if you're a St. Louis, Missouri, whatever the fuck, it's like just go out and do it. So yeah, that's cool. And like same people like Scope or like even Hate 5-6. It's like, like that shit didn't just like become huge overnight, like from day one.
Right.
Ingo didn't come huge from day one. Nothing cool ever does, and like very few things do to begin with. So like everybody's got to work for it. So yeah, it can feel discouraging sometimes, but at least for us, it was never like oh fuck a big scene or anything like that. I think it was like, like that would have been cool, but like we didn't live that reality. Like we had shows that sucked, and it's like, well, we're better off for it in our own way. So it's like, if you want to have a scene like the Bay, if you want to have a scene like New York, if you want to have a channel like Hate 5-6 or a podcast like Scope Exposure, fucking do it. That's what hardcore is. Like I don't have any like I didn't go to school for nonprofits. Like I graduated with a liberal arts associate's degree. I got a participation award for a degree. Like just go do it. Like go on the IRS's website for 6 hours, want to end your life, but then go start a venue. Like that's all it is.
Yeah, like I think it. I'll add in as far as like bands from LA or other stuff like it's even further back of the people being like we're building this shit and I almost think that's like cooler to be like, oh, we're in the construction years of this scene. And if it doesn't always fall on one person or one entity. And so I think if you have a dope fest, you have someone filming or documenting consistently, you have dope bands that are like, we're doing this all together, that will in 10 years time be like, oh yeah, like Calgary is just as poppin' as the Bay or Boise or whatever. So dude, I love how we've kind of like talked about all these things. And if there's not one person who's like starting a venue off of this podcast, like I would bet money on that myself.
Dude, I hope so. Yeah, and that person should hit me up because like we had to learn it all ourselves. We're like, I'll help you. That's the other last cool part about hardcore is like it's all women community. This shit's small, so like reach out to somebody, have somebody help you. Like when we started working on Underdogs, we hit up Tom from Real Art. He showed us all this shit. Like he told us all these cool, things to do to make this easier. It's like just get 5 cool people that you don't hate and just start something cool. Make a band, make a venue, make a podcast, make a YouTube channel. It's like the coolest part about hardcore is literally just doing it yourself, whatever it is. Just fucking make something cool.
I love that. Alex, one more question before we head towards the end of this podcast. I end every interview with a favorite mosh related story. So that's anything that's first to your head. That could be a bad mosh moment, a good mosh moment, a wholesome mosh moment, a bloody mosh moment. Whatever's first to your dome is how we start to end the show.
All right, I'm gonna do the last one that I did because like I have like a couple, but the dumbest one for sure. So it was the first Witness Chamber tour. It was in March, and we were playing Vancouver. So we did a few days with Apex Predator. Shout out Apex Predator. And the night before in Portland, all of those dudes moshed so hard for us. They were going off, and like after the set, a bunch of them were like, "Yo, like I think I like sprained my finger or something like that." Like I was like, "Damn, man, y'all got battle scars. Like respect." And then so the next night we play in Vancouver. And Vancouver is like Boise too. Like I love Vancouver. So I was like, all right, I gotta go off for Apex Predator. So last breakdown, it's the fucking crazy dumb, Casey's going off. And I'm like, all right, I'm gonna hit it. So I'm moshing and I feel myself swing back and connect with some dude's head. And I'm just like, oh shit, I broke my wrist. And fucking just like this huge amount of pain. And then I'm like trying to step to the side. I get like kicked in the stomach. I'm like, oh my fucking God, my wrist hurts. They finish playing. I like go like sit down behind our merch table. And I'm like, oh my God, my wrist hurts. And I was like, I think I broke my fucking wrist. And then after a while, I started moving it. I'm like, okay, I definitely did some to it, but it's not broken. Cause like I thought like there's like a thing that somebody told me was like, if you could open and close your hand, like nothing's broken, which is bullshit, by the way. Cause I was doing this and I was like, okay, it hurts, but like I can do it. So play the set, play 2 more days on tour. We drive overnight home from Tacoma. Everybody else goes to sleep and I'm like, I'm going to go to a doctor because this hurts. And I'm like, by this point, like I've played 3 shows. So I'm like, okay, there's no way it's broken. Like sprained, maybe like a small fracture, like
something's going on.
Yeah. I was like, okay, let's not make it worse. Let's go get it checked out. So I fucking go and I tell the doctor, I'm like, hey, like I did something with my wrist. Tell him what happened. I was like, I'm pretty sure it's just sprained, but like I just want to make sure in case. Like I don't want it to get worse because like I play bass. He's like, cool. We'll take some X-rays. We'll make sure you're good. But like, you don't look like you're in a lot of pain. You're moving it pretty well. Like, I think we're good. Take an X-ray, and I'm in that waiting room for like 45 minutes. I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with me? Like, why is this taking so long? And then a nurse comes in, and she's like, hey, we're gonna take you to like our procedural room. And I was like, why the fuck am I going to procedural? And we're walking down the hall, and the doctor like stops me. He's like, hey, come look at this. He shows me an X-ray, and he's like, you broke your shit clean. So I completely broke my wrist. I was like, are you fucking kidding me? So I fucking, because of Apex Predator, I played 3 sets with a broken wrist. I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Wow. That's wild.
Fucking sucked.
Yeah. Do not recommend. Okay, well, Alex, all the links for your bands, for your personal, and obviously for Underdogs. Underdogs will be the top link. Highly recommend everyone go check that out. Throw some money. Any amount, I'm sure, goes a long way. But if there's anything you want to shout out, anything you want to plug, or anything you want to send the people off with before we wrap up, the floor is yours.
Yeah, definitely. We're very close to our GoFundMe goal, so it's on our website. You can go to our GoFundMe. That'll be available. I want to.
When does the GoFundMe like close? Just so I'm aware of that date.
So the nice part about GoFundMe is they don't make you do like an end date. So we're basically fundraising until we get the 10K, or if it just dies off and everyone decides fuck you, then we're just going to take that money and we'll figure out another way. But we're really close, so I think we're going to get to that point pretty quickly here. Of course, any money.
Do you know how much you're at like right now?
I pulled it up earlier. I think we're just south of 7,500. I think we're at like 75% of the way there.
Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah, 74.15. So we're almost at 75% of the way there. If you're in Boise, you want to donate gear, we'll also take that. But as far as shout outs go, obviously I want to shout out you. Like you're such an awesome guy, and I've really appreciated talking with you and shit. I know we've chatted back and forth over the years now. And it's like I told you I was really excited to do this, and I was so jealous of like Charlie and Devin. I was like, I want to hang out with fucking Spencer. So shout out you, of course. But I want to shout out everyone in Boise who's been such a tremendous help in helping us get all this shit set up. I want to say a special thanks to all of our board members, especially Jason, Haley, and Josh, our executive team, who have been meeting with me and all of us for weeks and weeks and coming up with all these ideas and spending time on the IRS's website going through all this bullshit. So I can't thank them enough. I want to shout out Charlie for being like the coolest guy ever. I don't think I would have stayed in hardcore or like been as involved as was if he wasn't a friend for me at the times that he was. All of the Boise hardcore bands, shout out Vancouver, shout out FPE, all my friends in Vancouver. I'm sure I'm forgetting stuff. Shout out my mom for playing doc and VHS tapes. So I did all this dumb shit and wasted a bunch of money.
Mm-hmm. You always got to include your mom in the shout outs.
Oh yeah. Shout out my mom.
Shout out my mom. No, Alex, I've been a fan of yours ever since I saw you just go obscenely insane in the Swarm Beating set. But that's the beautiful thing about hardcore for me is that you have these unconventional ways of meeting people and then you build lifelong friendships. So I'm a big fan of you. Really inspired by this conversation. I know a lot of other people are. Again, please, let's go help the GoFundMe. I'm not going to say that the Scoped Exposure audience is going to get it up to 2,500. But if we could get it up even a good 100 or a couple of that, I would be stoked. So, dude, thank you again for coming on the show and chatting with me. This was beyond fun.
Dude, I can't wait to do it again. Let's talk again soon.